thousands of people go on theme park rides every day, they must be safe, right? Wrong. Prepare to discover that your worst nightmares are real as we count down the top 10 most dangerous theme park rides. Knott's Berry Farm is a fun-filled, adventure-packed park located less than 7 miles from Disneyland in Buena Park, California. In 2001, a 40-year-old woman decided to take on the thrill of the Perilous Plunge, a water ride that drops riders 115 feet and reaches a speed of 50 miles per hour during its descent. When the ride opened, it held the record for having the tallest and steepest drop in a water park. A year after its opening, however, the woman slipped from the ride at some point during the descent, falling and landing in the pool of water below. Horrifyingly, upon examination, it was discovered that the woman's seatbelt and lap rail were firmly in place. The log flume ride did not come equipped with 4-point harnesses, and the accident prompted park owners to implement new safety and restraint measures on the ride. It reopened after 8 months but closed permanently in 2012. When Action Park opened its tidal wave pool nearly 40 years ago, it was one of the first of its kind in the U.S., making it a popular attraction. The pool, however, suffered some major design flaws, making it especially dangerous. Instead of using salt water to make swimmers more buoyant, Action Park used fresh water. The result made it hard for even strong swimmers to navigate those high waves. Allegedly, lifeguards had to save over 100 people on the pool's opening day. 12 lifeguards manned the pool, and on busy days, they would save an average of 20 to 30 people. For reference, a lifeguard at a regular pool typically only saves 2 to 3 people over the course of a summer. Despite heightened lifeguard presence, 3 people died in the tidal wave pool between 1982 and 1987, earning it its ominous nickname, the Grave Pool. Russian mountains offered 17th century riders real thrills. They originated in Serra da Estrela, Portugal, as a way for Russian refugees that had fled the war to remember their motherland. They built these rides as wooden slides that were often 70 to 80 feet tall. They were originally coated in ice, and riders would slide down in sleds without any brakes for hundreds of feet of track. At one point, someone decided to add wheels to a cart, and the idea of the modern-day roller coaster was born. You can imagine that these weren't safe. The only thing to stop riders at the end were large bales of hay, and there was no way to control the direction or speed. But come on, it was the 1600s. We bet the term safety regulations didn't even exist back then. Up next is the Suspended Catch Air Device, or CSAD, in the Zero Gravity Amusement Park in Texas. Not for the faint of heart, this is less of a ride and more of a free fall where guests are suspended from a 16-story tower, then dropped 130 feet into a safety net. If this sounds scary to you, consider that guests were dropped without a bungee cord, and it becomes even more terrifying. There are no ropes or harnesses, and people have to make sure to fall properly and to drop into the giant net to avoid injury. This insane ride, if you can call it that, has people lining up to experience its thrills. Apparently, we walk the earth with hundreds of madmen, folks. This gets a big nuh-uh, nope from us. Everyone's worst roller coaster nightmare is derailment. Imagine coming to the top of a roller coaster and discovering it actually isn't attached to the track. And you've got Fujin Rajan II, a deadly roller coaster that was part of Japan's now defunct Expo Land amusement park. Surprisingly, this accident is more recent than you might think, as the crash occurred in 2007. Riders on Fujin Rajan discovered, to their horror, that the coaster upon which they were riding had become derailed, resulting in the fatality of one teenage girl and serious injuries of 19 other riders when the car went toppling to the ground. Horrifyingly, investigators found that not only had one of the car's axles broken resulting in that crash, but that most of the other cars had similar problems and that the majority of the ride's axles were cracked. It later came out that the ride had not been inspected, replaced, or repaired in 15 years, making this horrible crash seem inevitable. And we're back to this. Is it any wonder that Action Park was known as America's deadliest theme park? The Alpine Slide was also completely dangerous. Unsurprisingly, poor decision choices led to nasty injuries on the Alpine Slide, where riders went down a concrete track in little sled carts. The tracks were poorly built, and sleds would oftentimes skid off the track with nothing but hay bales to stop riders from falling down the side of mountains. Even more concerning was the fact that most of the brakes on the sleds were broken, leaving unsuspecting guests to coast down the mountain slides at alarming speeds. For some grisly imagery, at that point, there were no regulations that prohibited patrons from riding the Alpine Slide in their swimsuits, which many people did after spending time at the water park portion of Action Park. People in swimsuits wiping out on and scraping across concrete made for some nasty injuries, to say the least. Action Park closed in 1996 after financial woes regarding insurance, which is, of course, altogether unsurprising. Possibly the most misleading roller coaster name on this list, England's The Smiler caused more than one life-changing injury, let alone the mental health issues for which we're sure it's responsible. The ride at Alton Park had issues since its launch in 2013, where the Smiler would malfunction in a variety of ways, including suddenly stopping. Whenever the ride would break down, guests would likely be stranded upside down considering the track was composed of 14 loops. In 2015, a true crash occurred. Due to an operator error, an empty car collided with one carrying 16 passengers, leaving those involved stuck 20 feet in the air at a 45-degree angle until they could be freed. One patron described looking at the metal bars protruding into her legs and thinking she was going to die. She, along with 4 other passengers, had to have her leg amputated. Much to her dismay, and the dismay of other rides guests during the incident, Alton Park reopened the Smiler a year later. What a slap in the face to those whose lives have been forever changed by losing limbs. Breathe a sigh of relief, at least momentarily, because the accidents that occurred on Revere Beach's Derby Racer are around 100 years old, right after the introduction of America's first roller coasters. That doesn't make the accidents any less horrifying, though. In 1911, a man was ejected from the coaster, resulting in life-threatening injuries, and the ride only closed for 2 weeks. 6 years later, another man was killed when thrown from the coaster into the path of a second coaster train. Other riders were thrown from their cars, resulting in one man breaking nearly every bone in his body and another fracturing her skull. Despite the coaster's extremely poor safety record, lack of regulations resulted in this coaster operating until 1936. At which point the Massachusetts Supreme Court declared that it be demolished because it was too dangerous to remain in operation. A second Derby Racer was built in 1938, but that was mysteriously shut down and demolished in the 1940s. Not all rides have to be high thrill to be dangerous. In 1984, tragedy struck as a fire erupted in the Haunted Castle ride at Six Flags Great Adventure in New Jersey. Unfortunately, due to the nature of the ride and the fact that it did not contain smoke detectors or fire extinguishers, guests did not immediately realize the danger they were in. They assumed the fire was part of the ride and didn't hasten their exits. To compound the lack of smoke detectors, the building was also made of highly flammable materials, some of which were also toxic when heated so that some riders perished when inhaling the fumes. A volunteer firefighter recalled being unable to tell human bones from the ride's prop skeleton bones. All in all, 8 teenagers died and 7 others were badly injured by the accidental fire. The fire prompted state legislators to hold amusement parks to higher standards and crack down on fire safety regulations, along with making sure that rides that were meant to disorient riders had better exit protocols in place. Topping off our list is a ride. Well, you know what? We can't even call this thing a ride. It's the worst possible idea ever conceived of, set into motion to become a catapult of death. Anyhow, 2 brilliant guys named Richard Wicks and David Atkinhead built a human trebuchet at Middlemore Water Park in Somerset, UK.